Another edition of the On the Mic podcast is here, and we're going to talk a lot about this man. We're going to talk a lot of boxing with this man. If you follow this show, I don't have a lot of boxing people on the show because I'm more of an MMA guy. But when I was working at Sirius XM, they call him Gentleman Gerry Cooney, and he was definitely a gentleman to me. I won't talk about all the times he pushed me into the walls, but he is a great man, someone I would consider a friend. You know him if you know the sport of boxing. You can hear him on Sirius XM every Monday and Friday at the fights with him and Randy. Gerry Cooney, sir, how are you?
Hey, it's nice to be with you, and always a pleasure. I miss you in those halls, but I guess I missed everybody in those halls because we haven't been there in about a year and a half. But Sirius XM, we're doing great. We're talking the fight game up, and I'm going to try and turn you over from MMA to boxing. How's that today?
I mean, I do both. Like I more when I'll say this, when I took the job at Sirius, I really had to like tone into boxing. And, for me, when I was younger, Floyd Mayweather was the guy. And I was one of those casual boxing fans that, when is Floyd fighting, I'll watch. But over time, you start to see guys like a Terrence Crawford, a Canelo, a Caleb Plant. And then obviously you got the heavyweights, division very well. And, the Deontay Wilders, the Tyson Furies, so many names that I'm just going with the casual names. They really made me start watching a lot more recently. But a big about a month now in the world of boxing. And it started with Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. And in the boxing world, I'll just come out and ask you, they say this fight this weekend between Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant is the fight of the year before it even takes place. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think that on paper it looks good, but I think that Caleb Plant is not strong enough. And I think that Canelo Alvarez is going to do what he does, get to the body, work the body, 4 or 5 rounds, 6 rounds, and then he's going to turn it over. And listen, Caleb Plant is a champion. He's a world champion. So, he's got that proudness inside of himself, and he knows he's fighting Canelo Alvarez. So he's going to be in great shape. So we could see magic. It could be magical, but I just think that Canelo Alvarez will not be denied. He's just too strong, too much momentum. And by the way, you talked about the divisions, and I want to just tell you about the lightweight division. Devin Haney, Terrence, Teofimo Lopez. There's so many great guys. And the light heavyweight division. Boxing is deep in talent right now in all the divisions. Great fights.
Yeah, and we kind of joke around comparing it to MMA, MMA versus boxing, and I do want to talk about that later. But in a time where, like when I was growing up, and I was born in '92, so let's say in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, like for me again, it was just Floyd Mayweather, and then you would hear the old saying, "Boxing is dead, boxing is dead." I right now would argue that this is one of the best times in a long time for the sport of boxing. Would you agree with that?
I agree 150%. Back in the 80s when Holmes, they had a lot of great Ali, Frazier, then you had Holmes, then you got Mike Tyson. After Mike Tyson, kind of boxing slowed down a little bit and kind of died out. And a lot of guys that would have came to boxing because the business was so bad and the guys were getting raped and robbed financially, they went to football, basketball, and baseball. Now it's back strong. You got the Zone, you got Joe DeGuardi, you got Top Rank, Bob Arum and that great crew. And we have some great boxing guys, and they want to put the great fights on. So we're starting to see them. Obviously, the pandemic kind of really messed everything up for a long, long time, but it's coming back as trick. And like you said, Wilder Fury fought again. We're going to see Usyk Joshua. Who wins that fight? And I think that the winner from, Usyk Joshua should fight Fury, and the loser should fight Deontay Wilder. That's a great, matchup. 2 fights would do great numbers. And you're talking about the middleweights, the welterweights, Shawnee Porter, Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford. There's just new guys coming out that's making it so exciting.
Yeah, it's become a time now, Gerry, where like for me as a combat sports fan, this upcoming weekend is like Christmas for me. We've got UFC 268 at Madison Square Garden, and we have Canelo and Plant, and they're both going to happen on the same night. And sure, you could talk about ratings here over ratings there and who's going to purchase what. But if you're somebody like me who goes out and watches fights, you just have two monitors and you two TV screens. You can watch it all at the same time. And I think that's great for somebody like me. You talked about things have gotten better, though, in the sport of boxing. And that's one thing that I will personally admit has always soured me. It's we don't always get the fights that we're supposed to get when we're supposed to get them. And we could talk about this for hours. We're not going to. But you mentioned also the pandemic. I think despite the pandemic, boxing has made a huge jump into making these fights that we can't miss, giving us matchups that we want to see. And sometimes it's not even a matchup that, oh my God, we need to see these two fight, but they pull, a replacement, and that replacement comes in and sets the world on fire, and we've got an even greater fight. I mean, Teofimo Lopez over a year and a half ago shocked the world beating Lomachenko, and now we can't wait to see Teofimo Lopez fight anybody. So for my question to you is, although these promotions have had their hands kind of tied with the pandemic, do you think they're doing a much better job in putting on the fights that need to happen and that fans want to see?
Well, how about Devin Haney and Gervonta Davis? You're talking about great fights. We're getting to see them. They're making it happen. And I got to say, one of the main guys in my book, he's been in the game over 50 years, is Bob Arum. He found a way to get the guys isolated, come in, keep them healthy and fight. And so that's what kept the game alive. And it's grown. You talk about the pandemic, they had a lot of crossover fights, which, to my judgment is, you got to put a great MMA guy in there. He's not going to compete with a great boxer in the boxing ring. You put him in the cage, it's going to be a different story. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And those people that attracted from MMA, the younger kids, came over to watch those crossover fights, and hopefully a lot of them came to boxing. And so we're just growing. Both sports, it's exciting time. And listen, I'm going to talk about boxing. I've watched MMA; it's sensational, but nothing like boxing to me. And to see some of the matchups that are out there, Beterbiev at light heavyweight and Joe Smith or Bivol. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And the heavyweight division is back because you got 8 or 10 top guys. You got 6 or 7 that are B level, just ready to go up into A. And we're going to see all these fights coming up. And, we got top promoters doing them. So it's going to go on.
You're talking about the heavyweight division is back, and you also mentioned crossover fights. So I'm going to start with crossover fights just so we get it out of the way. And you know what name I'm going to bring up, and that's Jake Paul. And he's fighting a bunch of MMA guys, and most recently fought Tyron Woodley, and he did his thing against Tyron Woodley. And I think that was one of the ones, especially on the MMA side, people were like, well, he handled his own, so we kind of just, now let's see him against a boxer, and now he'll face Tommy Fury in December. Just a couple questions here on just Jake Paul. He's really kind of changed it up, especially for the younger crowd. I'll give him props on this. I think he does know how to put on a show as far as bringing attention to a fight. I love what he did with Amanda Serrano and putting her in the co-main event. I think women still in boxing need a better platform and a higher platform and a better paycheck, and especially someone like an Amanda Serrano. But also, I don't want to say he's there yet. Like, I don't want to call him a title contender, but I do think a fight against Tommy Fury can show us a lot about Jake Paul. Just what are your overall thoughts on him in boxing?
Well, you think about Jake Paul and you think about his brother. His brother went the distance with Mayweather. You're the guy you really aspire like. And I got to tell you something. After one of the rounds, Mayweather came back to the corner and his trainer said, listen, you got to use that jab. And Mayweather said, I can't. He's not letting me use the jab because he's athletic, because he knows how to fight. So does Jake Paul. And listen, that was a big fight when he beat that MMA guy. What's his name again? Woodley. Yeah. Woodley is a tough guy and is good with his hands. I think that Tommy Fury is going to be easier fight for him. But I think it's kind of running its course. The MMA crossover with the boxing and Woodley, all these different people. I think in the future, we'll see super guys doing it. We'll see superstars getting in there, mixing it up. But it's always got to be with boxing because no boxer's really going to go into the cage Because once the guy takes you down to the ground, I used to wrestle. I was a wrestler all my life. And once I get a hold of you and bring you on the ground, you can't do anything. So that's the story. I think that the fans are smarter than we're giving them credit for. And they got suckered in a little bit. And now they're backing off. The last couple of shows didn't do that great numbers. And, and so once in a while, we're going to find superstar matchups that'll take place. And it will be exciting and they'll do great numbers. But you can't come into boxing and be successful regularly. You just can't do it. I don't care who it is, Jake Paul or whose brother or whatever it is, or any guy in MMA. Because we can't go into their field. They're talented. It's just we're doing boxing. We have the edge.
Now, you talked about the Tommy Fury fight, said it might be a little bit of easier fight. For Jake or for Tommy?
I think for Jake. I think Jake is a tough kid. Him and his brother are very tough and durable and got a lot of guts. And I tell you the truth, I just feel like they have a good guy in their corner teaching them, breaking down the fight, telling them what they need to do. And I think that Tommy Fury doesn't have that experience. He hasn't been in the spotlight that big, except when he watches his Tyson fight. So I think the advantage got to go to Jake Paul.
With that said, then, you know how the business works. The more you win, the more eyes you get, the more attention you get, the more people want to fight you. And if Jake Paul is continuing to hand out these big paychecks for his fights, what would a win over Tommy Fury then do for him in the boxing world? Would you expect high caliber names to start calling for that fight?
No. Jake Paul can make it to about the quarterfinals in the Golden Gloves, okay? They're talking about Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson's 50, but Jake Paul does not want to get in the ring with Mike Tyson. You saw what happened when Roy Jones, who was a sensational middleweight, got in the ring with Mike Tyson. And one time during the matchup, he tried to put it on Mike Tyson a little bit. And Mike Tyson slapped him back into place and said, listen, bro, this is my ring. So that's where it's going to end. We're talking, you heard about, it might be against, Mike Tyson. That's a crazy story, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think it's his brother. Logan's actually scheduled to fight Mike Tyson in March or April of next year. Call me crazy. I don't think that fight happens. I
think that's a mistake. It's a mistake.
Yeah.
For Logan Paul. I mean, for Jake Paul. What it was.
Whichever ball it is, it's a mistake.
Yeah. You can't get in the ring with Mike Tyson. Tyson doesn't matter. He was a heavyweight champ of the world. He's got residue maybe left. That's still better than those guys.
Yeah, and that there's a viral clip that went out earlier this year where I think Jake Paul was on Mike Tyson's podcast and he was down talking McGregor. And Mike Tyson, to his credit, has given his life to boxing, but he's also dabbled a lot with a lot of UFC superstars and he's worked them out and all of that. And one of my favorite things about Mike to this day is Jake Paul is this new persona and he thinks he can beat anyone and everyone. And he's trash talking Conor McGregor on Mike Tyson's podcast. And Mike just looked over at him and he goes, he's not scared of you, right? And just like, and it just kind of froze Jake Paul. And it was always something to me where it's like, and just in that moment, and it was just a conversation, I feel like whether it was Jake Paul or Logan Paul, and right now it's Logan Paul that signed up to fight him, you're getting these big names. You're getting these great paychecks. Mm-hmm. But as you know, Gerry, and you had a storied career and you're a legend in your own right. As the saying goes, you don't play boxing. So I really like what you had to say about that and Jake Paul, because I do think it will run its course. I just hope it's not one of those things where someone will step up and take that fight and then Jake reconsiders ever stepping into a boxing ring again. I think he should really be selective.
I mean, he's made millions and millions of dollars. Unbelievable. Take the money and run. You can't think too much of yourself. Or you start to believe that you could do it, you're going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt because they're in a different world. We're talking about professional athletes who can set you up, find the openings, make the openings, and then conquer you. Where Jake Paul's a tough kid, durable guy, his brother's the same. They have good people in the corner, but you cannot get in there. And I like Mike Tyson too. He's really kind of cleaned his act up a little bit. He's getting his life going. He's got a great family. And I like what he's doing. He's doing great stuff for boxing and for Mike Tyson.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you also mentioned the heavyweight division, and obviously that's a division you know very well. With that being said, I'll start with just in your division's history. When I look back about a month ago and I look back at Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3, where does that rank in Gerry Cooney's list of top heavyweight fights of all time?
You know, I think that Tyson Fury is a very awkward kind of fight. He's so big, he's 6'9", and he feints a lot. So when you saw Klitschko fight him, every time Klitschko got ready to punch, Fury would feint him, throw him off balance. He'd have to reset, and then he'd reset, and then he'd reset, and then the fight was over. So Tyson Fury's a tough guy. In my day, if I'm fighting Tyson Fury, it's not like maybe I'm going to get to his body. Maybe this round I'm going to try and get to his body. That's my job. I got to find a way inside that jab and bang him in the ribs. And bang him in the ribs for 3 or 4 rounds till those hands come down, and then you turn it over. And I love Tyson Fury. He's a great fighter. When nobody wanted Deontay Wilder, he came back after a big cocaine and alcohol abuse, cleaned himself up, and said, I want Deontay Wilder. And they had 3 fights, and it's been a dream. So listen, he's got a lot of tough guys. He's just a phenomenal fighter. And he's big guy. He's out of shape, looks out of shape. He can go 12 rounds. He was almost 300 pounds. He went 12 hard rounds in there with Deontay Wilder. And you got to give Wilder credit because he changed. He fought Tyson Fury. Fury didn't have an easy way with him. Wilder was in there, dropped him a couple of times. And the only problem is that, Fury dropped Wilder an extra time and stopped him. But I think that Deontay Wilder really did a great job in this last fight, even in defeat. And we got a lot of opportunities for him.
Would you say that's a top 5 heavyweight of all time between those two? The one we just saw, the third fight?
It's too early to say something like that. It's too early to say something like that. But, listen, this last fight was sensational. I thought it was smart. It absolutely
was. Now, for me, I look at a guy, and I want to talk about your book that you have out, and I want to give some love to that as well. But also, anyone who knows your story knows I would assume, and sorry for assuming, that you have a soft spot for somebody like a Tyson Fury to get off the couch, to fight that mental health issues that he's had, to fight addiction issues that he's had, and to look at somebody like you said and Deontay Wilder and go, oh, nobody wants to fight that guy? I want to fight him. And Deontay Wilder, whether it was directly or indirectly, was a main reason why Tyson Fury got off the couch and changed his life for the better. When you hear that story and when you follow that story of Tyson Fury's almost life redemption, what does that mean to you? Not only just Tyson Fury the person, but Tyson Fury the championship boxer that he is.
Well, you see, when Tyson Fury had a fight with that kid from Sweden, he didn't get motivated. He didn't get his blood didn't get going. He just thought it was a fight, and it turned out to be he got buttered. He could have lost that fight. And so, listen, he needs motivation. He needs to have a passion to get off the couch, and that's what Deontay Wilder did for him. In my career, Don King owned all the heavyweights. I didn't sign with Don King. So why did he want me to get, he didn't want me to get experience. So he kept me out. I was fighting in my heyday once a year, maybe. That's pathetic. But like you said, motivation gets you off the couch, gives you a purpose and a reason. And he's a talented guy anyway. And so you got to give him a lot of credit. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm getting to Tyson Fury's body. I'm going to get in and hit those bottom 2 ribs on either side over and over again until he drops them hands. And it's been a lost art, body punching, because in the amateurs, you don't score points on it. So they stopped doing it. Now it's starting to come back again, hopefully.
You mentioned there's a bunch of B guys that are waiting to jump into the top level there at heavyweight, but there's still so many guys at the top of heavyweight. We had Usyk beat Joshua. Now we have that rematch. Let
me just tell you a little bit about that. Usyk
yes.
And Joshua. Listen, Joshua tried to box Usyk. You can't box a master boxer who's a cruiserweight, who's faster and quick on his feet and very good. You got to get inside. You got to rough him up. You got to bang him around. He's got a frail, his body's a lot, even though he was 220, he's a cruiserweight. You got to get him, bang him around, push him, throw him on the ropes, bang him, punch him in the belly. He didn't do it. Joshua tried to box him the whole night. I don't know what he was thinking about. Now he says he's got a new plan. I hope he does, but I don't think he can against Usyk. Usyk is just too good unless Joshua realizes he's got to give it a Joe Frazier sort of mentality. He's got to push him around. He's got to bang him on the shoulders, bang him on the hip, and bang him in the belly and slow Usyk down. If he can do that, he can win his championships back.
Yeah, and I think he's going to need to do that and win those championships back because we still, boxing fans still want to see that, right? They want to see that little trilogy or the Trinity-like matchup. They want to see Fury and Joshua. They're also kind of hoping, hey, maybe if Usyk does win and Wilder doesn't have anyone to fight, why don't we have Joshua and Wilder fight? We have Tyson Fury facing Dillian White in March of 2022. Who do you think it's more possible Anthony Joshua faces next year first? Would it be Tyson Fury or would it be Deontay Wilder?
I think a great matchup for those two guys is Wilder against Joshua. It would do unbelievable amount of numbers. Listen, Dillian White, I don't know if you guys ever watch this. If you go on YouTube and put on Tyson Fury and Dillian White, it shows you Dillian White knocking, Tyson Fury out cold. Now, it was early, it was a bunch of years ago, but he still caught him with a combination and knocked him out cold. If you go on YouTube, you can find that. But that's the old Tyson Fury. The new guy is filled with confidence, a lot of guts, and smarts. And he's got good people in his corner. And so I think it's going to be a much different fight. But he's also going into that ring with Dillian White. He's got to have that in the back of his brain somewhere. And then hopefully he can have a system to stay away from that.
Well, now I can't talk about the heavyweight division and not talk about everyone's recent favorite Cinderella, and that's Andy Ruiz. Does Andy Ruiz make a resurgence back to the top of the heavyweight division? Do you think we'll hear his name mentioned among some of the guys that we're talking about here?
The worst thing he did was win that title from Joshua. He got fat and went out driving around town with the Mexican hat on and spending all his money and forgot about fighting. You win the world championship. It's supposed to make you a better fighter, more confident fighter. He ran around, partying, came into the ring fat. Now Joshua boxed him, right? Joshua outboxed him all night long. Why didn't Joshua do that against Usyk? So do I like, I love him, Ruiz, but he's got to, and he's in Canelo's camp, I think.
Yeah.
So, they don't mess around.
Yeah.
Canelo or his camp. So he's got to be in good shape, and we got to see where he can go. I hope he didn't eat himself out of the division.
Yeah, let's hope not, because that would be something I would like to see him get back there as well. Kind of another name to add to the list. But you mentioned Canelo, and I just want to touch on that one more time before we talk about you, Gerry, because I have a lot of respect for you. But you said you do like Canelo this weekend over Caleb Plant. What is it that makes Canelo so special? Not just in his division, but really to the sport of boxing?
He's 200% dedicated. He's one of those guys that just is a boxer through and through. And he's in great shape. He's got the momentum going for him. He beat Kovalov. He beat all the top guys. And he beat Galani Golovkin twice or three times, whatever it was. And he's just got a plan. And he's going to work that plan, and he's going to stick to it. And he's got a great corner who's going to make adjustments for him if he needs to. But I think he's going to keep his hands up. He's going to get closer and closer to Caleb Plant, closer and closer, bang the body, get closer and closer, bang the body, and he's going to slow Caleb Plant down. And once he does that, just a matter of time.
You think he finishes Caleb Plant?
I think he does. I think unless Caleb Plant runs, or if he's going to fight. Listen, Caleb Plant is a world champion. He's a world champion. So he's got that motivation. But a guy like Canelo banging that body, hitting you on the hip and hitting you on the arms, kind of breaks that down. You say, wow, what happened? What's going on here? And if he starts getting hit, we've seen it in the past, through and through and through. And he's fought everybody, Canelo Alvarez. He fought Islandi Lara, very tough guy. He fought, and listen, I'm excited about him fighting the two twin brothers. What's the name? They're 160 pounds, 168 pounds. The Charlo brothers.
Charlo. That
looks like a great fight. Demetrius Andre. There's so many great guys in that division too that we're going to be able to see. So I mean, boxing is so deep in talent right now in all the divisions. It used to be that in order for boxing to be big and going strong, had to be a strong heavyweight division. That's not the case anymore. I don't believe that. I heard Andre Ward say that one time. I don't believe him. Middleweights are sensational. Canelo, everybody wants to see him. You got the lightweights. I mean, it's just unbelievable, fighters today. And we got Lomachenko coming back to see what he can do. And you got to really take your hat off to Teofimo Lopez, who beat Lomachenko at his own game. He and his father figured out the plan, and Lomachenko was lost. I mean, he tried to pick it up in the 11th round, but he faded. And Teofimo Lopez won. I was at Teofimo Lopez's camp a lot of 2 or 3 days a week. I used to go down there and watch him. And, I watched how he was having a hard time once, and I got a chance to talk to him. Tell him, listen, if you want to give yourself a hard time, say, okay, on Wednesdays, for half an hour, be hard on yourself. After that, let it go. Get going. You're a great fighter. You're a champion. And I don't know if that had any effect on him, but he's just a great fighter. He's a big puncher. He's grown in talent. And who knows? He's got tough guys. He's got to fight Gervonta Davis, Devin Haney. I mean, there's so many great guys out there that are in his division. So where does he go? Where do they go? Whatever it is, we're going to see it. We're going to be able to watch it firsthand.
Yeah, I can't wait. I mean, you mentioned guys. Do you think about all the guys we've mentioned today? Just talking about the state of boxing right now. I think the easiest question I have for you is still, no matter who we mention, in your mind, is Canelo still boxing's biggest superstar, or would it be a Tyson Fury, or is it too close to call?
I think that Canelo, in my opinion, is a little standoffish. He's a great fighter. I love it. I respect him. But I'm not that really close with him. He doesn't give off that vibe. But you got a lot of great fighters. You got Beterbiev at light heavyweight. You got Teofimo Lopez. I mean, there's so many great guys. I mean, the guy just won the welterweight championship. He wants Terrence Crawford. He wants Andre Ward. There's so many great fighters. I can't compare him. Who's the best guy? Right. There's so many talented guys, really.
The boxing business is booming, and that leads me to really you, Gerry. And, when we work together, I'll admit, coming in, not being, I don't want to say dumb to boxing, but not knowing just all about boxing and having the opportunity to work with you, get to know you, get to know about your career, you as a person now, just so many things. And it was one of the biggest honors I had of working at Sirius XM was having the opportunity to work alongside you and kind of follow just everything that you stand for. And you mentioned earlier, like you were a wrestler growing up through and through. And, I tell the story all the time on this show that, I got into the UFC, into MMA because I was moving back from New Jersey a while ago. I thought I had a job in Philly. It didn't pan out. And I was packing my stuff up at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and there was a UFC fight on, and the guy finished his opponent in the second round, and it was this Irish guy, and he was yelling at the guy he was supposed to face. And I'm like, this guy's jumping over the cage and yelling at his opponent. I like this guy because I like flamboyant. I had been a football and a basketball guy my entire life, but I like the guys who talked. I like the guys who were outspoken and showboated a lot. And I was like, I don't know who that guy is, but I need to find out. So I did research. It ended up being Conor McGregor. I'm texting my friends all week, and they're like, yeah, he fights this weekend. That was an old fight. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know. And so ever since then, I hadn't missed a UFC fight. That was 6 years ago. In boxing, as I mentioned earlier today.
Hold on a second.
Yes.
The guy that got me was the guy who fought Conor McGregor finally. Magomov, I think his name is.
Habib Nurmagomedov. Yeah.
Habib, okay, now he was a beast. He
Mm-hmm.
just took Conor McGregor apart and then went over the cage after his trainer.
Yes.
That
Yes.
guy was a beast. And
Yes.
then too bad
Yes.
he lost his father, and I think he's going to retire. I hope he doesn't, because it's a pleasure watching that guy. No nonsense kind of guy. He really is dedicated to search and destroy, and that's a great guy to promote MMA. So
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
anyway,
And he's doing a great job as a coach now, because I do feel like he made his family a promise. You know, he's from Dagestan, and they're very, very family, oriented.
religious.
And yeah, and so when he made his mother the promise that he wasn't going to go back, I do believe him. But he's coaching a lot of guys now, and a guy in McGregor's division who's undefeated and just won this past weekend, and he looks like the next real deal. So it's beautiful to see a fighter go, you know what, I've done my time. I've achieved everything. I made a promise to my family. Now I'm going to be a coach, and I'm going to lead the next generation. So that's a really cool thing by Habib there.
You know, Mikey, I got to tell you something. I agree with you 100%. Teaching somebody, watching them develop, watching them get it, if they got that mentality. I got 2 kids here. My daughter's 20 years old. My son's 23. They both can fight, and they're both punchers. Now, I don't want them to fight, but I taught them how to protect themselves. It builds self-esteem for your whole life. It makes you stand up for yourself. And that's what that guy does. And I so identify with teaching somebody how to protect yourself and how to be the most powerful is phenomenal.
Well, that's actually where I was going with this. You know, as someone who grew up a wrestler, Gerry, for me, this podcast, as much as we just broke down a bunch of fights in boxing, when I'm talking to analysts like yourself or former fighters or current fighters, I don't come on here for the technical side. I want people to get to know a Gerry Cooney or some of the other people that have come on this show for who they are as a person, not just who they are or how they see fighting or however they see their sport. I want people to get to know the person. And for me, when I hear you say I was a wrestler your entire life, what got me into the sport, it was the flamboyant fighter. But I had to go back and learn that he used to collect, welfare checks from Ireland. And he was about to take he used to be a plumber. And his dad and him used to fight because he didn't want to work in the trade business anymore. He wanted to fight. And for me, it's all about what led you into the ring or the cage and what keeps you there. So for me, Gerry, my question to you is, you had a great career. And I'm going to talk about your book here in a second, but what led you into boxing, and what was it that pushed you to go on and have the career that you had?
It's amazing, but, I started bad. My father was a raging alcoholic, very abusive. I had 5 brothers and sisters. We all hid in our own places. And my oldest brother left the house at 15, and he started going to a gym. So when he was 19, I was 16. I used to go with him, and I hit the heavy bag. And one day I asked if I could box this guy, and the guy knocked me all around. I had been boxing for about 2 months. This guy was fighting for 5 years, and he knocked me around the gym. So I went home. I said, forget it. I threw the gloves on the floor. But I went home, and I went down in the basement, and I hit the bag and expecting the guy's going to come on me. And 3 days later, I went back, and they asked if I could box that kid again at 15 and a half. And he couldn't do that to me no more. And 6 months later, I won the middleweight championship in Madison Square Garden in the Golden Gloves. And what happened for me is I found out that boxing was a way for me to express my anger for where I grew up in that atmosphere. And then they put my picture in the paper. It seemed like every day after my Golden Gloves bout, on the back page of the Daily News, my picture was on it, and it made me somebody. And it soothed my anger. When I got in the ring and the bell rang, I couldn't feel fear. I had to fight. And that was a great gift for me. And it fed me, and it made me somebody. And so that's how I became a fighter. And, I never really should say I loved the game. Who wants to go in there and be thinking months and months and months, I got to fight this guy who's looking to kick my ass? But we do it. And we find the strength, and we work hard, and you develop. I think about when your training camp starts, and then 3 months down the road, you're boxing with 5 or 6 different fresh guys every day. You keep developing. You keep getting stronger. You keep learning new stuff. That's a gift. And when I was in it, I had a self-sabotage mechanism because I was told I was no good. I was a failure. and I was never going to mount to anything. And in the biggest fight of my life, looking back, I realized when I knocked out Ken Norton that night, when you think I would say, well, I better get a good trainer. I'm going to fight Larry Holmes for the heavyweight championship of the world. I started drinking a bottle of scotch, some recreational drugs, and 13 months later, I got stopped in the 13th round. Now, I don't know whether it was fear or I felt I deserved it. I don't know what it was. But looking back, I would have loved to have 4 or 5 more fights before I fought Holmes for the experience. But it didn't happen. So today, I'm here. Listen, I'm clear-headed. I save my money. I help people every day. I love life. And I'm on with you. This is great. Do you understand? It's a great life that God gave me from my trials and tribulations. And it's all documented in the book. And the great part about it is at the end is a happy ending. We make it through the storm. You know, I remember someone told me one time I was seeing this therapist, he said, when you close your eyes, what do you see? I said, I see a big black hole. And he told me, good. He said, you got to start going in that hole now. And my first thought was, are you out of your mind? I'm never going in that hole. But I've been going in that hole and I've become free, loving, clear, intimate, joyful, happy, because we have to work at it. That's the thing, you know, we all get a set of rules growing up, but when we get to a certain age, we have to grow on that. We have to make ourselves better. And of course, you know, life is fast. I mean, I fought Holmes. It was June 11, 1982. That was over 40 years ago. But, you know, I got a great life. I love my wife, my kids. I got 3 beautiful kids. And I'm doing boxing.
Yeah.
I'm doing boxing. I'm talking about boxing. I still know the game. I love watching fighters because I know what they're thinking. They're trying to work it out. The bell rings. I'm going to work it out. I don't know how many, there's a picture of me staring at my opponent in between rounds. And I'm saying, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get to him and I'm going to get to him. Then you watch the expression on the fighter's face change. When you start to get to him, bang him to the body, and he starts to feel it, and you see the fear coming in him. And then that's the great experience. And that's what boxing is to us professional athletes. And the only thing is that, you know, there's a small window for us.
Yeah.
When world class works. And when you're in the world class, there's nothing better in the world. Split second time, and you create the shot and you land it, you just kind of smile to yourself. But it only lasts a short time, and you really got to be taking care of yourself. So like a guy like Canelo, he's fine-tuned every time he gets in there. That's the guy I wish I could have been. That motivation.
When I look at the sport, both sports, MMA and boxing, and like I said, I was more of a baseball, football, basketball guy growing up. You know, here in Chicago, I was, you know, born during the Jordan days and was told about Walter Payton and all that. But they were so in the spotlight, and it was perfect, and nothing could ever go wrong if you were in the NBA or in the NFL. And you would hear about tragic cases when players would kind of throw it all away. We just had one this week in the Las Vegas Raiders organization where a 22-year-old wide receiver going 156 DUI death. And for me, it's unfortunate. My condolences to her, to, you know, the young woman's family, but we've almost, especially in this day and age, go, oh, well, they're famous, they have money, so they'll get out of it some way or another. You know, when I was in high school, Michael Vick was the biggest thing in the world. And then when I got out of high school, Michael Vick was back in the NFL. So it's one of those things, especially in those sports, where you can make a wrong turn and get back into your sport. I think what has drawn me so much into combat sports is sometimes there are people, and somebody who's from your great state of New York, Jared Gordon, who fights in the UFC. His story's well documented. He's overdosed twice. He just got married last week, and he's now sober. And, you know, for me, I've always been big on mental health and talking about mental health on this podcast. I think more than any other sports in this world, I think combat sports, boxing and MMA in particular, address mental health. There is obviously the physical health side of it, and getting punched and getting kicked and all of that. It does take a toll on your body. But I think more than anything, when you talk about, you know, you got beat up and then you went back 3 days later and you've been boxing ever since, there's something about this sport, and we'll just talk boxing right now, but there's something about it. When you're in training camp and you get an injury, it pushes you more. When you're not making money, it pushes you more. When you have to cut weight, you could easily walk out of that sauna. You could easily get off the treadmill. But something about boxing and just being in the gym really turns over a lot of people, or it brings them down. For you, having gone through all that you have gone through, what is it? Is it the time alone? Is it the people in your corners pushing you? Or is it having those moments saying, I can't take a step back. If I want to get somewhere in life, I have to fight through these times?
Well, it's the whole thing. We have to find a way, and boxing does that for us. And we're all going to make mistakes. I mean, and a lot of times there's a lot of tragedy, and you just hope you get someone to grab you by the arm that says, "Come on, kid, let's pay attention." Like I wished when I knocked out Norton that night that someone grabbed me and said, "Hey, come on, Cooney, stick with me now. This is really important. You're going to fight Larry Holmes for the heavyweight championship of the world." I didn't have that. I didn't trust anybody. I didn't know how to trust where I came from. And so I stayed out of the pain. I had a big hole in my chest all my life. When I drank, the pain the hole went away. I felt funny, I fit in, but that was a lie. You never see the Raiders of the Lost Ark when they go up and they take the 12 commandments up on the hill and they open the box and it looks so beautiful. And then it turns on them and kills everybody. That's what happens. And it goes like that. And so you got to pay really attention to it. And you just pray that, listen, God's in our corner. He's looking out for us. He saved my life somehow.
I do want to mention your book, Gentleman Gerry, Contender in the Ring, A Champion in Recovery. You can get it on Amazon. I need to get it. I wanted to get it while we were still working together, but obviously COVID shut that all down. But I do plan on getting it by the end of this year. I will definitely make sure I have it because I think it's very important for me. And Gerry, I want to share a story that I don't know. It was probably just a little conversation to you, but it meant a lot to me in the moment. When we were working together and we were still in the office, it was one of my first times still working with you. And I had recently gotten into a relationship that we were talking about. And like 2 weeks later, it was over. And it was my first one since moving out to the East Coast. And I was devastated. And to be very authentic and honest with you and anyone who will watch this, that weekend I had decided, like, my family was out of town. I was just going to go out and I was going to get over it. I didn't care. I had money. I could go drink. That's what I was going to go do. And you and I had a very brief conversation. You said that was her fault. And you kind of hyped me up a little bit. And you kind of told me just stay the path and keep being me. And I just remember working my shift with you after that, not saying really much of anything to anyone. And then I had friends from work like, "Yo, we going out? I thought we were going out. Like, let's get you over this." And I was like, "No, I'm going to go home, guys." And I went home and I just hung out. Now, yeah, I still go out, from time to time, but there are times, and I'll admit this, before we started recording, I had mentioned, the past of someone very close to me over the last year. Anyone who follows me on social media knows exactly who I'm talking about. And I will say, I truly wish that unfortunately, because of COVID, like, you would have been the first one, Gerry. And I do mean this. I'm not saying this because you're here, but given the circumstances, that was somebody where I didn't really have, like, I had family and I had people checking up on me, but I didn't have a lot of that face to face. And it wasn't from somebody on the outside. And although now I consider you a friend, that conversation was one that I was hoping for. And obviously the COVID pandemic shut it down. We couldn't be face to face, but you didn't even know me at the time. And for you to give me that small piece of advice, it went a very long way. And it's something that sometimes I still reflect on that night and that conversation we had. And it's helped me through a lot. So I feel like a lot of that is also documented in your book. I feel like anyone who could pick up Gentleman Gerry, the book, will get a lot of help, from your story as well.
Well, Mike, and we struggle from time to time. We get confused, but we can feel it. I'm a sensitive guy. I've been through the woods, and you can see somebody, pass it on to them. I tell people, now the girl that passed, you really cared for her, right? She was a good girl. But basically, a lot of people get in trouble in relationships. I tell them, spend a week and write down all the great things about her. everything great about her. The second week, write about all the bad things about her in your relationship, and then weigh it out. If it's 50-50, I would say to my brother, don't stay in it. If it's 70-30, I would say, I don't know yet. That's too great. If it's 80-20, I'd say stay in it and work on it. But, people were blinded by, the soft spot. We have to really look at the truth, because we're going to spend a lot of time with young people. And I'm glad you got over it. We're here for each other. That's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do. That's where I come from. And I had nobody. So I can sense what was going on. And we just say, listen, try this, try that. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. It's if you're open for it. And obviously you got something, and that makes me feel good to hear you say that to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so for me, and I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I do got to ask, what led you to tell your story? Because so many times we'll hear about, an athlete or a fighter or somebody that's famous or anything. They'll tell their story when it's too late, or they'll allow their story to be told by somebody else. And that, to me, that is one of the most unfortunate things that can happen in life. There was a MMA fighter who recently passed away out of Las Vegas, and one of his teammates was on this podcast, and she said their coach spoke at his funeral and said, "We always remember the birth date and the end date, but what matters most is that hyphen in between on your tombstone and on your certificate. It's what you did during that hyphen." And I feel like too often people don't tell their story, and that's why I've started to try and open up and tell my story. It's still hard, and I probably won't tell it for a very long time, but you built up, everything to tell your story and make a book on it, a book that everyone must get. I'm looking at it right now on Amazon, and I definitely need to get it, and I will get it. But what led you to writing this book and telling your story in the way that you did?
Well, some people were talking to me about it, and I said, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for that. And then I hooked up with this guy, and we started writing the story, but I wasn't paying attention. I was reading, I was getting it out. He was doing a lot of research. I was talking about those situations. And then we finished the book, writing it. And I thought to myself, this guy, he was a therapist, was a little bit of a, I wanted the true story. So I read the book that he wrote. And I said, no, I'm a tough guy. And I got to read the whole book and see what was going on in my life. And it really helped me to understand, listen, I was a world-class fighter. I went very far from where I came from. I made it out of the hole. And so that's the story that we do. We all struggle. We all get knocked down in life. Do we get up, knock the dust off our pants, and move on? That's the story that people need to hear, because people in life, they're working 2 or 3 jobs a week. They need help. They need to understand that we're human too. And maybe that'll give them a little bit of strength. Maybe that'll give them courage to try something different with their life, or to get motivated, or to love themselves more. How about that? That's a big line. Learn to love yourself. I did. And when you talked about Gerry Cooney, about love, I had to go. But through this process and through growing up, I learned that, listen, I had a pretty amazing life. I've been very lucky. And I'm a fighter, and I'm still a fighter. Do I make mistakes? Yes. I'm dysfunctional. I have dysfunction in my family. I'm learning about it every day. I'm working at it, and I'm feeling good. And that's the story, that we all got this. What are you going to do? It's like I think about Richard Pryor. Remember Richard Pryor? He was smoking a crack pipe, and James Brown came to his house and saw Richard Pryor with the crack pipers and said, Richard, what you going to do today? And that's the story. What am I going to do today to change those thoughts, to make me free, to be available for somebody who needs my information? That's the story. Wow.
What would you like, and just a couple more here, Gerry, and I really appreciate it, and I hope you'll come back on in the future.
Anytime.
How would you like the story of Gerry Cooney to be defined? If, when people look back, or when people do mention Gerry Cooney, and not just world-class fighter, but Gerry Cooney, the person, the father, the brother, the husband, everything that you are, how do you want the story of Gerry Cooney shortly in a quick summary to be told, what would you want everyone to say about you?
I love my life. I made mistakes like everybody. I came up the ladder. I didn't reach my potential. Could have been a much better fighter had I understood I was trying to survive. I didn't learn to live. My father taught me how to survive. And then through recovery and through, getting out of the game, looking back at my life, I found out where I veered off. I didn't stay on the road. I veered off and took vacations in the atmosphere. Remember that song? I remember HBO did a special on me one time, and one of the songs was, I take month-long vacations in the stratosphere because I couldn't trust. I didn't know how to do that stuff. And unfortunately, we get that information through the pain that we go through. Hopefully, we make it through. And I was lucky that, my God looked out for me, and he showed me the way and opened the door here and gave me this situation. And, a lot of things I screwed up, a lot of commercials I was supposed to go on, I didn't show up for, a lot of different things. But I have a great life. I saved my money. I love my family. I love telling my story. I love being out there, giving people information that I've learned that I know is right. And that's a story. I'm fighting every day to get better.
Well, I truly appreciate you telling your story and giving me about an hour of your time. I wasn't expecting this much. It really means a lot to me. I listen, it's the holiday season now. We got past Halloween, so we got Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. I think this is my favorite time of the year because it really brings a lot of people together, whether it's family, friends, or sometimes, as you said, just learning to love yourself. And that's a big focus for me. And I'm not just saying it because you're here. I am going to be getting your book here, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. And, that's going to take me into this holiday time, which last year wasn't a holiday time for me. A lot of last year during the holidays, I heard, I'm sorry. We're glad you're home, but we're sorry. So sorry to hear. I'm sorry. And it was like, I think honestly, Gerry, the more I talk to you, the more I'm just like, when I look back at what last year was for me, I don't want to hear I'm sorry anymore. But I was allowing people's sadness for me to carry me through when I wasn't having good days and saying, well, everyone feels bad for me anyways. It's okay to stay in bed. It's okay to not do the right things. It's okay I wasn't working when I moved back home to Chicago right away. And I was okay with just laying in bed and watching movies all day and not having money and having to ask people for help just to keep my phone on at times. And, now that I talk to you, I'm thinking, yeah, that was the wrong way to go about it. That was absolutely the wrong way to go about it. In the moment, I'm sorry is nice, but this holiday season, I want it completely different. I want people to light up when I'm there, and I want everyone I'm around to light up. But more importantly, I want to light up. So I really agree with a lot of what you're saying.
Well, and that's the story, is that you want to feel bad for half an hour today? Go ahead. Go ahead, feel lousy if you want. It's all good. Get up, go for a 3-mile walk, go to the gym, go to the movies, read a book, help somebody, call them up. When I'm with me, sometimes I'm in the wrong room. Sometimes I got to put myself out there and help somebody else. And then I feel, wow, this is magical. Sometimes I talk to people, I can't believe what I just said. And that's the gift of a higher power that speaks through you to help somebody else get to a better place. That's a gift.
Well, you can hear Gerry Cooney on Sirius XM, channel 156, Fight Nation, at the Fights with Randy Gordon, Mondays and Fridays from 11 to 2 Eastern time. So make sure to listen to them then. Gerry,
12 to 2.
12 to 2. Excuse me, 12 to 2. Gerry, before I let you go, anything else? Did I miss anything?
I tell people, because people kind of drifted away from boxing, put boxing scene on your computer page and just look over a couple of stories. Start to follow it again. It's a great game. There's great personalities. There's great stories in this fight game. And we have to support them. These people are fighting for their lives. Every time they get in that ring, they're risking their lives. So yeah, follow this game. It's important. And MMA too, and UFC and wrestling. I love wrestling too. So listen, keep punching, baby.
I will. Gerry, thank you so much for this.
Great
I
to
really
do you,
appreciate
Michael.
it. definitely hope to get you on before the end of the year again.
You got it, baby. Thank you, Mike.
Thank
See
you.
ya. Take care, guys.